Hello, Robert.
Hello, Hugo.
So, it's the end of times, as we know, and I think this is already starting well. We're both white males in their 30s, so obviously we're going to talk about all video games today. I think it's the probably the only thing we can do right now instead of going outside and seeing people. And so this is basically it, the gist of this new podcast in English with my beautiful accent. um, and so yeah, this thing is called SVGA. It's like I said, a new thing. We try something and we'll see where it leads. And
Yeah,
so
could
for
be fun, could be terrible. Who knows?
yeah, probably terrible. It's annoying. But yeah, maybe it'll end up being perfect, like a certain president says. We'll see what happens. So, um, yeah, we're this week. This first episode, we're discussing a really obscure game. I don't think anybody has heard about it. What have we played this week, Robert?
We've played Half-Life, very, very niche PC game.
Yeah,
Didn't really go very far. Didn't make much of a splash.
no.
Nobody's heard of it or really thought of it since it came out, and which seemed like a good place to start.
Yeah, no cultural impact whatsoever, no legacy, no, no,
Of
no
course,
giant video games empire that came out of this. Nothing. It's
no, no.
uh,
Of course, we're full of shit. It's probably the I'd say one of the most important PC games. You know,
one of the
at least
most.
of the '90s.
Yeah, it's well. I'm already hearing the Doom fans are screaming, but yeah, it's I'd say it's one of the yeah, like you said, one of the most important. Maybe not the. It's probably
Yeah,
maybe the second most important shooter ever on PC, at least on the first person shooter type, with the an incredible cultural impact, and with of course a galaxy of memes, references, and jokes, and everything else. Um, and its legacies continue up to until today. I mean, Alex VR, Half-Life Alex VR came out a few weeks back, I think, and so it's been nearly what 22. It's 22 years now since Half-Life came out in '98.
God, 22 years.
Yeah, it's like we've discussed before. When a game is old enough to vote, you see, it's a vintage one.
Old enough
Um,
to vote. Jeez, it can drink in the U.S.
yeah, but yeah, Half-Life is. We're gonna talk about specifically Half-Life One today because there's a lot of stuff to say about the Half-Life series. I really don't think we have the time today to go through it all. I mean, there's two main games, no, four expansions, including episode one and episode two,
Yeah.
and of course everything else, the related games with Portal and so on and so on. Um, but yeah, like I said, Half-Life 1 came out in '98 by, at the time, what was a really little studio called Valve. And the funny thing is, I was looking at the Wikipedia page about Half-Life, and it was published by Sierra Studios.
Yeah.
And so at the time, Sierra was, of course, really big. Today, I don't even know if it exists anymore.
That's
Uh,
a very good question. I can't remember the last time I've seen a Sierra game, to be
yeah,
honest.
I mean, it was the same around the same time that Homeworld came out, also published by Sierra. So Sierra, of course, from the amongst many examples, but King Quest, for example, Space Quest, all
Hoyle
these,
cards.
Yeah, yeah. So all these adventure games, for example, from the early '90s, was there some from the end of the '80s too? I don't remember.
Maybe I'm trying to remember the one that I first remember is Hoyle, which was just like solitaire, poker,
Hmm.
all kinds of basic like casino card games, and that may have been late '80s, early '90s. It actually, I think, had an SVGA option though,
Oh,
so
well, that's convenient for our podcast.
very important that we try and make at least one connection at an episode,
Yeah,
and I think we've covered it there.
yeah. Uh, but yeah, let's come back. Let's come back to Half-Life Involved. Of course, it wasn't the first FPS. Like I said, I've talked about Doom. There was Wolfenstein before that. There was, but I think is, and maybe you'll agree with me there, is the one of the many things that set Half-Life apart from the other games, from the big names of the FPS of the era, was I think two things maybe. One is the fact that there's no real cutscenes
No,
in the game. I mean, there's the way the action is presented to the player is that you are part of what we could call a cinematic experience,
right? Yeah,
and
the whole thing happens in a straight line, more or less.
yeah, exactly. I mean,
There's no like exit elevator or anything.
no, I mean, well, there's some
I mean, there's
loading.
plenty of elevators,
Yeah,
but yeah,
uh,
but there's no like you don't hit the button and then black screen and then
yeah.
level two.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't see yourself in the third person. It's always you're always in the suit, in the famous HEV suit of Gordon Freeman, who is a young scientist at the age of 27, which at the time was really old for me, maybe for you too,
Yeah.
I guess. And now it's and now we feel old when we think about Gordon Freeman. He has
Yeah,
this.
it's odd to think that like Gordon Freeman is actually younger than I am now because I always just kind of pictured him as oh, I'm playing this sort of old cat. Honestly, I always kind of pictured him as middle aged. Maybe it's just the goatee.
Yeah, maybe it was. I mean, and he has his PhD, so it's he has his entire career in front of him. I guess. Well, seeing how it turned out, I'm not sure if it's a good thing or not, but
Yeah, the way it turned out, he kind of has the universe in front of him now, but that's
yeah. But so yeah, so that was the first part of the way that the story is presented. Like I said, you're in for a ride. You don't have to step out, for example, of this kind of box where you stand and when you're sitting. You can always turn around, not look at the don't know the explosions or the monsters or the special effects, and you can look at the ground, and the stuff will happen anyway. They won't the game won't take your eyes and set and tell you you have to look at this exactly this
right.
at this time and
Which is really it seems it's hard to believe now because
yeah,
everything seems sort of it's all like that, or at least there's elements of that in most modern games. But at the time, it like it, no one had done it.
yeah.
And looking back, it seems so simple. Like I've been playing it for the last few days, and I haven't played all the way through it, spent that much time on it, but I played through a fair bit of it, and it's interesting how many elements of it that seem now to be it is a bit dated, not just graphics wise,
Yeah.
but I mean it the number of hits it takes to break a box actually turned out to really irritate me after a while.
Yeah.
But there the way that it is constructed was at the time unbelievable, like really truly like revolutionary.
Yeah. I mean, you really feel that not only your character is part of something, but you are part of something. You're doing the stuff that's happening on the screen. And it's not, well, of course, there's a bunch of scripted action sequences, but when you, for example, you press a button and there's a sequence where you have to launch a rocket into space. Well,
Right.
it's when the rocket launches, you're still in the I think what is it? It's a command center, I think. Well,
Yeah.
basically the place where you push the button, and you stay there. There's no, like, once again, no cutscene, no fade to black, and there's you have to take, you can. I remember doing this, taking a step back because the window is broken, and you fear that you're gonna get burned by the exhaust of the rocket, because
Right.
it happens before, when you do, I think the part with the three-headed monster, you have to
I
to
hated that.
push, you have to activate a test function for a rocket engine, and if you
Right.
stay too close to the window, you're gonna get burned. You're gonna lose health points.
Yeah, even earlier than that, actually, the first time you go to the surface and you think, "Oh, I'm saved" or whatever,
Yeah,
um, it turns out you get to the surface. There's a bunch of soldiers there. You kill them, and then they start shelling you with artillery or something, and you have to
yeah,
jump back downstairs. But if you go too close to a vent opening when you're getting bombed, you die,
yeah.
which I found out the hard way.
But
Forgotten completely.
and that's the second point I wanted to make, is that the way that the environment reacts to you, the way that the enemies reacts to you and reacts to other parts of the environment of our other enemies. There's a bunch of course, yes, there was, in Doom, for example, there was infighting between monsters. So demons started to attack other demons. But in Half-Life, it seems really, really organic in a way. And there's a bunch of stuff you can do, of course, in Half-Life 2, which has a better graphic engine and so on. But you can set some barrels on fire. And I think this is mostly from Half-Life 2, but the point stands is that you can act on the environment to attack other creatures instead of just
Right.
shooting, for example, at a creature that's called the barnacle that has a long tongue, basically. And if you get stuck in the tongue, it just drags you up and starts attacking you. You can, if you set something on fire, the creature, or even if it's debris or a corpse or whatever, the creature is gonna drag this thing up and try to eat it. And it can also happen to other enemies. They're gonna get killed by uh, because the mindset was, I think, at the time, okay, everything that's not me is friendly between themselves. The enemies won't attack them,
Right.
and like I said, it happens in Doom, but it's mostly. I feel like it was mostly a problem of scripting, maybe, and now it's supposed to work that way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and it feels like, oh yeah, like the soldiers will fight the aliens
Yeah,
in ways that make sense, or the turrets will shoot at, they'll shoot at you, they'll shoot at the aliens, but
yeah,
I don't think they shoot at the soldiers.
no,
Which, like you talk about, you can sort of play them against each other, where you hit one of the trip lasers and it takes care of the aliens, and then you just have to take out the turret, which is it. It adds an element of just, you're not just trying to um, you're not just trying to shoot everyone, and you're not just trying to solve a puzzle.
yeah,
There's a tactical element, or like a critical thinking element that works organically in a way that isn't just like a set piece
yeah.
battle or a set piece puzzle. There's a you can kind of work in the world in a way that is, if not realistic, at least a little more kind of thought out.
exactly. We'll come back. We'll come back to the puzzles. But I just I'm looking at the time now. It's been 15, 20 minutes, and we still haven't talked about the plot of the game. And
No, we
so,
haven't.
and it is an interesting plot because it sets the table for everything else that comes afterward. Maybe I'll just go and try to summarize the thing. Is like I said, you're playing Gordon Freeman, who has his PhD in theoretical physics and who works as a lab assistant in a place called Black Mesa, which is a super secret, super advanced research base in the American desert. I don't know if
Right.
it's Nevada, maybe,
I'm not sure if it's
or New
Nevada or New
Mexico.
Mexico. I think it actually might be New Mexico,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's one of those sort of, it's, I think it's, I don't know if it's explicitly said that it's a government program, but it's certainly government funded because I know that the scientists at one point are like, well, there goes our grant money.
yeah. But so yeah, so you work there, and there's this sequence at the beginning of the game, which is at the time felt quite long, and today feels as well, one part tech demo and one part a really good use of some downtime to do some exposition. But
Yeah.
so you have this tram ride where you go to work basically, and what happens is you're supposed to do an experiment where you basically push a cart, which is why you studied to get a PhD, I guess. And, and so everything goes wrong, of course, and
Yeah, you put some kind of crystal into a laser beam
yeah,
electric thing of some sort and opens up a portal to another dimension
yeah.
in the worst possible way.
Yeah, so what they call a resonance cascade, which is fancy term to say shit hits the fan and everything's going wrong. And so yeah, what this does is basically this, like you said, opens up a portal to another dimension, and so these bunch of alien races starts coming in the base. And well, you later discover that they are all enslaved to some kind of overseer, some kind of floating big baby. I don't.
Yeah,
It's really weird, but so yeah, and you have to basically this causes chaos in the base, and you have to well get some help. And I don't.
yeah, yeah. The your goal is never really goes beyond. Well, you kind of first have to go get help, and then you're maybe trying to stop it, and then
Yeah.
you're in the other dimension, and it's
Well, yeah, because ultimately stopping it means killing this huge creature. Well, this is really, really at the end of the game, but at first, like you said, you have to get help, and then, oh, they're soldiers, and they're gonna help us. Well, no, and so,
no,
and
they're there to kill everyone because it's because it's gone so badly. They don't want the world to find out.
yeah, and then there's some special ops people like coming in to kill everyone, including the soldiers. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. And then eventually, yeah, you go to the alien dimension and start exploring a part of the game that is up to this day subject to fierce debate as for its quality. Um, because you have all this. I think the game takes me. It's been a while since I've played the original version, but 6 to 8 hours maybe to go through if
Yeah, it seems about right.
playing on
I,
normal difficulty.
I put in a good sort of 2.5 maybe hours, and I was taking it kind of slow, and at one point I got lost. Because actually, one of the things that this game has that modern games don't have as much is the kind of the ability to get lost or
Yeah,
not really know exactly where, because there's no compass with a waypoint direction or anything. You
yeah.
just
You cannot press a key to have a line drawn on the floor towards your objective. They had this in Dead Space, I think, and it was useful in the game. But yeah, it's like you talked about a compass. There's no, of course, there's no fast travel. For example, it's not an RPG, but there's no there's no tip toolbar. Maybe that's not the right word. The right word. Sorry, but there's no tooltip. There we go. There's no tooltip on the screen saying, "Oh, you have to go this way. You have to activate this." Uh,
Yeah, you don't have objectives that you're trying to solve. You're just trying to keep moving forward, and
yeah.
sometimes that involves pressing a button. Sometimes it's killing something. Sometimes it's just not getting your head taken off an event fan.
Yeah, exactly. And usually it's pretty straightforward, but I remember there's some parts including, well, there's a lot of parts where you are on rails, basically. There is a small platform on rails and you have to go through something that looks like a maze. And I remember the old version, it's really easy to get lost. You have to figure out the right way to navigate the tracks. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can spend I don't know, an hour in this, which sucks because it's not a really good part of the game. Um, and they did the same thing with Half-Life 2, where it's it's also a tech demo where, oh, we have all these cool effects, stuff that is floating in the water that you can activate, and then, oh, it raises a platform, um, and you talked about this at the beginning. It's old now. It's an old tech, old graphics tech, and it doesn't always work the way it's intended to do. Um, and so sometimes you know what you have to do, but you're there and saying, really? Do you really? Do I really have to carry this box over there? And don't know if you remember that part. There's a place at near the beginning where you have to drag a box across the ground
Yeah,
in the office complex. And the way that it works is, if your computer is too fast, the box will just zip on the floor, just gonna go at the on the end of the hallway, and you have to try it out over again. And this all these little things. Or for example, the fact that when you start the game, you end after your tram ride, after you have all this exposition, you arrive at your stop, and the security guard, comes at the door of the tram and pushes buttons to unlock the door, basically. And if you look closely, when he presses the buttons, he makes the beep sound with his mouth. So I don't know what was the graphical limitation there 22 years ago. Uh, but yeah, if you really look closely, you can see, and it happens a few times because he has to open a bunch of doors. But yeah, he makes the beep sound with his mouth. So so yeah,
it's
there's a bunch of stuff that shows the age of the game, unfortunately.
yeah, and it's also interesting though because it still has a training scenario which have kind of mostly been phased out by now. I
Yeah,
find in most games, but it also has kind of the train you as you go along in a lot of things, where there'll be sort of smaller puzzles like with the boxes
yeah,
that are teaching you a mechanic of the game before it gets really difficult.
yeah. Because today I think, well, I don't I don't think we see a lot of FPS games with puzzle mechanics these days.
No.
There's puzzle game, of course, but usually it's some platforming stuff, and you don't. Well, first of all, you don't really see platforming in the first person anymore. I don't think.
Yeah, there's not a lot of like jump from box to box or
Yeah.
God forbid climb a bunch of ladders in a sequence.
Yeah, those damn ladders, man. I think I've seen some platforming in the latest Doom game, but it looks like something that's been a bit tacked on instead of being developed entirely for the game. But it's nothing compared to Half-Life, where there's a bunch of places where you have to be nearly pixel perfect to not make something blow up, for example. Or yeah, you've talked about the ladders. It's both a testament to the fluidity, I'd say, of the game, where you can go up and down ladders while shooting, or just not looking at the place where you want to go, or you can jump from ladders effortlessly. But it's also sometimes you can just fail uh, to grab said ladder and just fall to your death. And
Yeah,
there's a bunch of stuff that is really hit or miss. I've talked about not wanting to blow something up. There's a sequence a bit later in the game where you end up in a building and you have this NPC that says, "Oh no," don't remember exactly what he says, but they're gonna be careful, do not blow the stuff up. And in this game, there's a bunch of times where you see some trip mines. So they're basically an explosive device set on a wall on the floor with a laser coming out. And just to get rid of it, you stand back, you take out your handgun and you shoot the thing and it's going to blow up and everything's going to be fine. And so you're at that place and you see, I remember perfectly that the first time I was there, I said, oh, okay, that's easy. It's just another bunch of mines. And so picks up my handgun and just starts shooting. And the mine blows up, but everything else in the building blows up, including, it seems, a nuclear bomb. So,
right.
and you have all these sequences where you have to use all the skills that you got from the training session. Um, Jumping, being sneaky, the famous duck jump, which
Oh,
is
that duck jump.
the physically impossible, I think.
I remember the first time through the training thing that even in the training scenario had a lot of difficulty just like even getting like why am I doing this? Why does it work like this?
But it's useful. I mean, in especially in the end of the game. But yeah, the duck jump is. I mean, today it's so easy. It's control space. Um, but yeah, it requires a lot of practice, and it's
Yeah,
like,
and it took very precise timing too. It wasn't very forgiving. Like if you screwed it up, you were done.
yeah, yeah, you have to try again, and so there's all these sequences. Once again, I've talked about the tech demo aspect. Is like, oh, look at what we can do with our game, and it's fine, but once again, 22 years later, it's dated a bit.
Yeah,
Um, and I mean, so yeah, so I think I feel we're just going in multiple directions at once uh, in this. Um, but so yeah, so Half-Life is it's so I don't want to say so unique because well I think it is. I don't know what you think about this, but I haven't seen another game like Half-Life, besides, of course, the other Half-Life games. But yeah, to this day, up to this day, I mean, it's a Half-Life game. You don't see it. It's not Call of Duty. It's not a platforming game. It's not an RPG. Um, so it's a bunch of things put together with duct tape, I think, maybe on some on some levels. Sometimes it's you have to know exactly what you're doing. You have to, like I said, be pixel perfect to do some stuff. Sometimes it's frustrating. They tried to use some effects on the textures to give the impression, for example, that it was some icy surface and you're
right.
just skidding like a madman and you're just swearing in front of your computer because it's it's bad.
Yes.
But there's a way to it that you don't really see in any other game.
No, I think that's right. Like there's nothing quite like it in the same combination of, blast away shooter, kind of long arc story, bunch of puzzle, but not an RPG, and it's a very specific mix, and it doesn't really fit into any category, and that's before we even get into kind of all the mods and other things
Yeah,
that sort of sprouted out of it, which I don't think had really happened before. Like I know games I had played previously, like Quake 2 had done some mods, but that was mostly just sort of new online maps and
yeah,
different skins and things. Duke Nukem 3D actually had, some mods, but it was very limited in kind of what you could do.
yeah,
Whereas this kind of opened up like a whole box of things that were really like, I mean, Counter Strike,
yeah.
Day of Defeat,
Team
um,
Team Fortress.
Team Fortress, which was Team Fortress a Quake mod originally?
I think it was. I think it was, but I remember playing it, the original one, not Team Fortress 2. I remember playing it after completing Half-Life. I think there was a version for Half-Life, and I think that the fact is that you cannot really take Half-Life and not talk about Steam, which is
No.
today, which is a behemoth of video games, and you can buy games and sorry, we can play games online on multiplayer and etc. But at the time, it was this small greenish app
Yeah. And
that
I think I remember it coming out basically to, because there was an anti-cheat stuff with it,
yeah,
and it was to, I think it was for the launch of, by this point Valve had bought, I think, some of the mods like Counter Strike
yeah,
and a couple others, and it was to kind of give them a way to get updates out to everyone. I think my brain tells me it was the 1.6 version of Counter Strike, which I may be pulling that number just straight out of my butt, but it was, at the time, it was just kind of a sort of server finder, anti cheat, update delivery service, which, looking back, was, when I think back to what it took to update things and to
yeah,
sort of, you'd go and log onto a server and all of a sudden, like, nothing is working, you can't connect to anything, and now we're talking multiplayer, but all of a sudden things would not work and you wouldn't know why until you realize, like, oh, there's been some kind of update, and you had to go find it,
yeah,
install it. And now, I think in large part thanks to Steam, that is all just so seamless. Like
yeah,
it just it, and that's before you get into like the way they're able to sell things, and that's kind of evolved along with consoles and all sorts of stuff. But that kind of came out of this like weird unwieldy mass of mods and updates and all
hmm
sorts of stuff to sort of bring it into one place and give it that seamlessness. And you kind of lost some things when that happened. You lost some of the sort of wild west nature of it all, but at the same time, it makes life so much easier in many ways.
yeah. And today, well, for a few years now, there's the workshop section of Steam where you can submit your mods and subscribe to mods and uh, remember seeing installation instructions for both, for example, a physical copy of a game and for a Steam version. And for the Steam version, you only had to subscribe. And for the physical copy or a game you bought on GOG, for example, or another place, um, you had to, of course, download the mod, and there was sometimes 10, 15, 20 steps
Yeah.
to install this thing. And yeah, it's all it's really all connected because yeah, it's a way to not only the game was fluid, but I think Valve knew that if they wanted to keep their player base in one place and eventually sell them, well, Half-Life 2 and Team Fortress 2 and Counter, all these versions of Counter-Strike, they had to keep them uh, in a in one place, specifically in one on one marketplace. And I remember there was a lot of pushback at the time. People felt that they were constrained, and
A lot of DRM issues.
yeah, exactly. And today there's still this feeling in some circles that, oh well, you buy a game on Steam and it doesn't really belong to you. You buy the right to play the game, and it's the if tomorrow Valve decided to close down Steam, well, you could lose your entire library. I think there's a line somewhere in their service agreement where they say if this thing happen, you'll be able to download all the stuff that you bought. But I don't think it's ever going to shut down. Well, not
Right.
for a few years at least.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that that argument I think held a lot more sway, at least with me personally. Like it made a lot more sense to me sort of before Steam became kind of like, the standard,
yeah,
because now it's not just like a way of getting things. It is the way of getting, like, it is, the
the main way of getting things. Yeah.
primary way of getting a PC game.
And at the time, it was basically an honor to be featured on Steam. And today, I think there's 5 to 6 thousand games a year on that platform. A bunch of crap, of course, but yeah, if you're not on Steam today, you have a problem. Or maybe you've been bought out by Epic Games, but that's a whole nother story. I want to come back to Half-Life to talk maybe quickly about the expansions, because at the time, contrary to today, where you basically buy a DLC and or a season pass or any stuff like that, you had these fully featured expansions. Well, was it really fully featured? I don't remember, but you had,
Um, yeah, I think it was fully like
yeah,
I believe you needed the original
yeah,
to play them, but they were. I actually played a little bit of Opposing Force recently,
hmm,
which was the first of them, where essentially you come back as a soldier
yeah,
and you get dropped in this thing. And it's interesting, in the opening part, you actually go through. You're flying in a plane. You go through this canyon, and you recognize parts from the original game, where at some point, as Gordon Freeman, you're going to be in these things. And
yeah.
I don't think you ever directly cross paths, but you kind of.
It happens once. You can see where in the original game, Gordon's is trying to go to Zen, which is the alien dimension. There's all this whole apparatus to basically teleport you to the other side, and right at the end, where when you're being attacked by flying aliens that are shooting fireballs for anyway, uh, and you run on the ledge to jump into the portal. And when you play Opposing Force, there's a brief sequence where you see Gordon Freeman jump into the portal. You always come in 30 seconds too late
Right.
to do anything. But yeah, it was a way, once again, never really seen before, where you play the bad guy, if you want, and then just see the other side of the story.
Yeah, and I think I remember the first time I played through it, I really enjoyed it. Like, it was Opposing Force, at least, was done really well, and it added a few things to the game, like medics and engineers, just basically NPCs that fought alongside you and had different roles. Added a few weapons, and and basically just added another layer to the story that was interesting and still quite fun to play without getting too sort of repetitive or shitty.
Yeah, it was, well, they had new enemies, new tactics, you can control a squad, new weapons, of course, and it was developed by a little studio called Gearbox Software. I don't know if you've heard about them. Of course, they didn't do anything important after that. Um,
Last they
but
were heard of.
but yeah, so there's, and of course we have to maybe talk about Blue Shift, um, where you play the security guard called Barney, and this is a running guy because in Half-Life 1, Barney is one of many copies of itself. Basically a generic NPC who just helps Gordon from time to
Yes,
time. And
basically cannon fodder
yeah,
who will
exactly.
kind of save you a little bit of ammo if you let him do most of the shooting for a while.
Yeah, and he can help you open doors once or twice, I think.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
yeah,
not
so
often.
and in Blue Shift you play as Barney, but the funny thing is in Half-Life 2 and after that there's this whole lore thing about, oh, Barney's your friend, he owes you a beer. It's been what, 20 years now
Yeah,
since between Half-Life 1 and 2. And then it's this whole personality, this whole character that is developed around, which was basically a name and nondescript appearance. So,
yeah.
so yeah, Blue Shift is really shorter than Half-Life and Opposing Force,
I
and
can't even remember if I've ever played it. I know I have it in Steam, but I don't
it's not
remember it.
it's not really good. It's I don't think that I think that the main appeal of Blue Shift at the time, I remember getting this pack. I was always late playing Half-Life. I never played it at the when it came out. I didn't have the computer for it anyway. But a few years later, I just bought this pack, including well, basically the entire box set of Half-Life, Opposing Force, Blue Shift, and I think Counter Strike.
Yeah, I
And
think it came with one of those. Yeah.
yeah, and so Blue Shift had this weapons pack, which was called quote unquote HD, and so it changed all the weapons. So you went
Right.
from I think a submachine gun to an M16 and stuff like that. The shotgun was really louder and felt more powerful. The submachine gun too. Um, and I think that was the main appeal of Blue Shift, because besides that, it's what, 3 hours long, maybe four
Yeah.
tops.
y- Yeah, and if I played it, it definitely wasn't very long because it didn't. I didn't spend enough time with it to for it to make an impression. So that makes total sense.
But yeah, so we've talked about a bunch of stuff about, of course, about Half-Life. Um, I think maybe the most important thing is, even if the game has its flaws, and there's a bunch of them, the way that it was not only presented, like I said, with the story arc, and the way that the story is given to you instead of, well, it's not really given to you. You're living it instead of being
Yeah.
force-fed, and the way that the enemy is interacted with the environment and with yourself. They could set traps. They could attack you with grenades. They could flank you, especially the soldiers. All of this, and with with the universe, of course, with this invasion from another dimension, there's a bunch of stuff about parallel worlds and this mysterious figure called the G-Man with the suitcase. All of this combines to create one of the maybe long-lasting legacy of the video game history. There's a bunch, of course, there's franchises like, I think I've talked about it before, but Call of Duty or Medal of
Yeah.
Honor. There were 5, 10, 15 titles in the series. But if you look at the Half-Life franchise, um, it still follows the same arc, the same
Yes.
universe,
Yeah.
and
They feel they're they feel connected,
yeah,
and it's it it's kind of more than the sum of its parts. Like you talk about the flaws and stuff, and there are several, but
yeah,
it the way it all holds together and kind of, I don't want to say elevates video games, but it makes it something more tangible, or maybe a little less frivolous than
hmm
previous games.
I don't. I think there's a way some aspect of it that is obviously tainted by nostalgia. I
Yes.
don't know if someone younger person perhaps picking up Half-Life today would feel the same way of course we felt about it more than 20 years ago. But I think especially if you consider for example Black Mesa, which is of course the name of the science complex, but also the name of a fan project that took the original Half-Life and recreated it in the Source engine, which is basically the engine, the graphics engine used in Half-Life 2 and so on. Um, it took nearly 10 years to complete, I think, and now it's officially released. Um, if you take this and I think you could become as invested, as interested in the Half-Life universe than if you had picked it up 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. Because the graphics, if you take, once again, the original Half-Life today, there's a bunch of stuff that doesn't really work. The graphics, of course, are dated.
Yeah.
Um,
Lighting doesn't really work.
yeah,
It's you it feels its age.
yeah. But once again, if you take I think the only thing it took was maybe a new coat of paint with
Yeah.
Black Mesa, which is not only a coat of paint, but it's the same. I have the same feeling, the same. I don't want to say glee because it's it's quite a depressive game.
Yeah.
It's
When you really think about what's going on, it's quite bleak.
yeah, but if you want to go back, if you want to discover it for yourself, maybe it's better to uh, pick up Black Mesa, which isn't really a one-for-one recreation of Half-Life, of course. They changed a bunch of things. They added stuff. They removed parts that were too long, too complicated, too tedious. But I think it's a great way to once again get in the universe and then maybe play Half-Life 2. I mean, you could just pick up Half-Life 2 and play it, but there's a lots of references, lots of stuff that you're maybe gonna miss.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
yeah, you don't really have the same sort of feel for the world you're being dropped into, because in Half-Life 2 you're dropped into this sort of dystopian future that um that if you play the first one, it's like, oh wow, this is what we did.
Yeah,
It that adds something that the that Half-Life 2 on its own does, which is a extremely good game on its own,
yeah,
but if you played the first one, it adds this layer of like, oh wow, things really went badly.
exactly. Um, so Robert, I think this for this first try, this first episode of SVGA, I think it went quite good, quite well. I think maybe gonna end it there because we could talk on and on about, of course, Half-Life and the Half-Life 2, and maybe we could in a future episode maybe we could talk about the this multiplayer aspect because we
Oh yeah.
touched on it a bit but not really. Um,
Which is, looking back, like where all of my time ended up getting spent. Like if you look in relative terms.
Yeah, I mean, who didn't play Counter Strike after coming back from school, or played Team Fortress, or played? Uh,
I was actually in a clan where we would play at 5 in the morning,
oh
so I got
wow,
up early. I only did this for like a month or two. It was a lot.
I can see why. Wow, it's yeah, it's. I cannot see myself today. I mean, maybe I do this. Sometimes I do this for work, but just getting up at 5 a.m. We're old, Robert. I mean, we want,
Oh,
if we can sleep, we're gonna sleep.
yeah,
But
yeah, and
yeah,
not even
yeah.
for matches, just for practice.
Oh God.
That's probably revealing a little too much about myself, but that's
Yeah,
what
I mean,
podcasts are about now.
we all did mistakes in our past. We all have our mistakes, but so yeah, thank you very much to for doing this with me for this once again first episode of this SVGA podcast, and
It's been a pleasure.
I hope we'll be able to do this again soon.
Very
And
soon. I mean, we've kind of got the time on our hands.
yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to say. And for, of course, everyone that is listening, if you're still there, I hope so. Thank you for being there. And you'll be, I don't want to say you can find all the other episodes on our website, because for now, there's no other episodes. But if you want to hear about movies, if you want to hear about journalism, there's a bunch of other stuff that we did on pf.ca. We're also on Spotify. We're on iTunes, and I don't want to miss one. There's on SoundCloud, yeah, of course. So thank you for being there, and we'll see you next time.